Tom, like, I think that one thing that he has done, and the difference between what I saw with a four bats, is that you can go trace his work. You can see, at least I got some Carfax.
You make a distinction between an unsigned artist versus an independent artist, and you've done a couple great videos on this. Four bats, we've talked about Kanye, and kind of like this new definition of being independent. What are your thoughts on this?
Can't get rid of the independence. You can't get rid of the fact that there are so many independents right now that are finding all kind of traction on social media, and they are figuring out, hey, a deal is optional. I can monetize my content. I can set up a Printful or Printify and get my merchandise print on demand. They're figuring out how to monetize their career on their own, and they have the reach. So then you have to start asking the question, well, what else do I need access to? Is it the playlist? Is it the relationships? And I think a lot of where the direction of independence is going, in the traditional sense of folks who are building up small businesses, sometimes solopreneurs, that are figuring out with a very small team, if not just by themselves, they're building it up, they're scaling, and then it becomes different level of independence, right? My level of independence, even after 20 years of doing this, is very different from a Tech Nine and a Strange Music or a Rhymesayers and Atmosphere. Like, it's very different. Those are like almost like the corporate versions of independence as is traditionally said. However, I do think there's an effort to rebrand it. When I look at a new distributor that is out here that is exclusive to artists of a certain level named Gamma, presenting fun facts on their Instagram of, did you know that Usher is the first independent artist to perform at the Super Bowl? I started to scratch my head a bit because I'm like, so instead of trying to get rid of the independence, impossible. Instead of trying to replace them, can't do that. We're just going to rebrand what independent is. We're going to blur the lines. So now I look at that and I say it's unfair to then compare, a Tech Nine to a Usher and say, well, why didn't Tech Nine play the Super Bowl? Right? Like, Usher did it. Didn't. So I think they're under some kind of a rebranding. They're blurring the lines purposely so that they could use that as a marketing tool to make one artist seem more pro ownership, more authentic, more in control of their business and accessible. I'm just like you guys here. I'm going to deliver this video sales letter on my phone because I'm using the same thing as you. We've seen the play many of times. And so now I think what's happening is that they're rebranding it. I've always tried to make sure before we even talk about that rebranding, independent up and coming to me is someone who is still on the fence about what they actually want out of their career. Some of them want to be signed. Some of them want to figure out what independence looks like for them. Some of them don't know what the hell they're doing. You can't put them in the same category as somebody who's taking care of getting their own registering code and figuring out the necessity of UPC codes and ISRC codes, and someone who's trademarking their name, and someone who's doing all these things to structure an actual business. You can't make the comparison and say, oh, all of y'all are independent. Because when you do that, the general audience starts to think that, hey, the guy that just started yesterday and you guys should collab because you're on the same level. And it's like, I'm sure even with Miss Krystle, like, I've seen you perform your music. There's a certain tier and expectation I would expect of someone who has access to work with you. You're not doing charity. You're a professional who's doing awesome work, and you deserve to work with other professionals or people that you just appreciate their art.
Right.
And so
and let me ask you this real fast. What was your take or a situation with four bats? You can summarize that.
So I summarized that. So with four bats, it was more so me responding back to those who are tagging me, who wanted me to talk about this artist who mysteriously rose to popularity, has only like 4 songs out on Spotify and all these different platforms. But on Spotify specifically, I think it's like 70 million streams on one song. And then on the 5th song or the 4th song, he gets a feature with Drake. And then he's getting these cosigns where Kanye's like, yeah, it's an artist I want to work with. But yet you've never seen him perform live. You don't see interviews for him. He has a voice that sounds like it's been pitched up in post. And his visual representation is completely different. He's like in a shiesty mask and he's singing with these very high notes. And so when you look at that, and anybody beyond just being in the music industry, anybody who's been a fan of wrestling, you know a production when you see one. And this is a phenomenal marketing plan, phenomenal rollout, because it's got us talking, and it's probably what they had in intent. But then when you start to see his manager has all these connections into the industry, you start to realize, like, once again, all independence is not made the same. especially nowadays.
A Music Attorney is your #1 legal resource for artists, producers, and record labels. Get contract templates, one-on-one legal advice, free master classes, and everything you need for your music business. Go to tommusicattorney.com. Are you saying that we have a sacred class here as independents, right? And so an artist like this should not be deemed an independent artist? You just say he's an unsigned artist?
I think
He should be
unsigned,
shunned from our
right,
community?
not shunned from the community, not at all. I think that he has a phenomenal talent. I'm interested in seeing where it goes, but I do think it's disingenuous to say that this is the independent grind because it just doesn't work like this. It feels like, based upon the things that you have heard from him in interviews, it feels like they've came up with a story, and he tells a story about he wasn't taking music serious until he got his heart broke, and then all of a sudden that got him to 70 million. Like, my thing is, where are your Carfax? You know what I'm saying? Like, where is your you know what I'm saying? As you are grinding, as you are building a business, we have been in this, and we understand that there are videos, there are interviews, they're like clues to how you got to this place. So of course, people are going to have questions, and people were questioning whether or not he was with some demon industry plant. I didn't have an issue with him being an industry plant if that was the case. I think that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing with marketing, because I understand marketing. But I do have an issue with that being the perception of we all do the same thing as independents. Right. And it's like, no, your independence has some cheat codes attached to it. Okay, and so for that to be attached to that, it just feels like it puts other people in a situation where they start pointing fingers and saying, well, why haven't you done that? And I think it sways the conversation in a direction that it doesn't need to be if they were just honest about, hey, I'm getting this assistance, I'm unsigned, and I have aspirations to be signed. I think he did sign with OVO and Drake. So, yeah, it's...
Well, two other examples that come to mind, right? We have these big top-tier artists like a Demi Lovato. And at one point, she had finished her contract, and she was independent. So she ended up going and doing a deal with one of the majors through a distribution deal. So she didn't sign for a time, and she just kind of worked the system, which I was like, that's great. In fact, I don't know why Taylor Swift didn't do this. When her contract ended, she went and signed with Universal again, which I don't get. But setting that aside, I'm just like, if you have the resources, the connection, the audience, you know, I say this for the small independent artists. I go, if you can do this yourself, do this yourself. You don't need anyone. If your goal is to sign with someone and get the record deal, like, that's cool. The idea is to get a business partner, which is what the label should be, to come up with a plan. We're going to grow you. This is how we're going to do it. And this is the exchange. You are giving ownership of your music in exchange for the promises that we are making. We may or may not follow through on it. Right. So one example would be a big artist who is like spit out and now independent because they decide to just do this themselves. And often a lot of these artists end up starting their own labels and signing artists, and they become the label. But we also have, you know, and this is a minority opinion that I've seen before, but for Tom MacDonald. So Tom MacDonald is a very successful independent artist, and, you know, he's done and had very successful marketing ploys that he's done to promote his stuff, where he's talking about some challenge with a distributor or, you know, a billboard or whatever. And it starts a conversation around what he's doing as an independent, and he'll compare and he'll say, you know, look at me, and you know, I wrote this song. It was just me. I produced it, da 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 da. And then me compared to a major artist, and this major artist had like 8 writers on the track and whatever, and showing an equality and basically saying, as an independent, it's impossible for me to break through because of this. So guys, go support me, you know, and by doing that, he gets the support, and then he'll get to that #1. And so from a marketing kind of ploy, you can definitely commend him. He's a great marketer. But can you say someone like Tom MacDonald, if he's going to drop a music video and have 9 million views on it, is he your independent artist?
Well, two things I would say about that, because I've done stories on Tom MacDonald as well. One, I think it is a big mistake for the majority of independent artists to believe that because we're in the music industry, that we're all in the same business. I had a legendary artist from out here named Glasses Malone come here to my house, and we had an interview and had a conversation where he brilliantly broke down there's a difference between the record business and the music business. When you're playing the record business, there's things that are much more valuable than the music itself. The music is an important tool, but it's not as important as the Grammys, the vanity statistics, the award shows, the appearances on late night TV shows, just the entire media push, and all these things that are important in this world that deprioritize the music. When you're in the music business, the music is the business. And you're creating these marketing plans around the concept of the album. You're creating all these different things that are fed from the album. The album or the music itself is the business that you're in, which is why we don't just put out a stupid amount of music. Most of us don't put a crazy amount of music out there for the sake of quantity because we're not playing that game. But I think that there are people who are independent who feel like I am a part of that game, and they don't recognize you're playing the record business game and you're never going to win that. Now, there are people like a Tom MacDonald who will be the exceptions to the rule, and I salute what he's doing. I always say my independent business is my independent business, and I would never want to dive into somebody else's situation unless they've disclosed this and tried to present it as, yeah, I'm independent too. And it's like, I find like problematic because you're not disclosing that there are relationships and that there are advantages to what you're doing because you chose to have one foot in one game and one foot in the other game. And I think that when we think that we're all in the same ecosystem, that's the first problem that gets created. So that's my first thing. With Tom, like, I think that one thing that he has done, and the difference between what I saw with a Four Bats, is that you can go trace his work. You can see, I didn't meet him as an artist first. I heard the name through another independent artist that I work with named Triz. I heard his name, but I never had listened to the music. You know what I saw him doing first? YouTube shorts.
Yeah.
And short after short after short, and they were going viral. Now, I don't know what the story of that is, but at least I got some Carfax. At least I got some receipts or some a trail that has led to like, okay, I could see an artist like this finding success with the content. You've put the work in. My biggest concern and why this is even a conversation on my channel is it's not so much about that person. You have a responsibility to take care of your business. To me, it's about the ripple effect, because when you do present yourself as this is the way that it genuinely happened, I think you produce a future generation of lazy artists who think that that's all they have to do in order to blow up. Why do the work? Orbats didn't have to do all this. Why do I have to do all this? And that's not his fault, but there is a cause and effect by presenting stories like this that don't tell the entire truth. And he's not the first one. There's been tons of people who have done this before, but I think that's where it becomes problematic, because those people end up coming to me telling me how I should run my business. Fans of those folks.
Yeah, I love what you said that you go, we're not all in the same ecosystem. And I think it's really what I'm driving at is kind of, this idea of unfair comparisons and being like, Usher as an independent artist, is that a fair one-to-one for your average independent artist? No, and even when I was chatting with Ben Jordan, he made this point. He's like, I'm independent, but I'm not your average independent.
Sure.
Same with Tom MacDonald. Again, an independent artist typically, like, is not going to be able to, like, I dropped a video and it has like 10 million views on it in 2 seconds. Like, you know what I'm saying? So when someone's waving the flag of like, I'm an independent artist and you should, support me for these reasons because I'm so different, I think it goes back to kind of your conversation with these other artists. Is it like a ploy? Is it like a, for Four Bats? Was it just part of the rollout plan? And, really there's big label, money and effort behind it. Now, does that impact anything at the end of the day? For the person watching this, if you're an independent artist in whatever realm you are in, you are on your own mission. You are on your own path. And so I think that's where we get into like, you shouldn't compare yourself to anyone. Yes, there might be someone dropping a video and it does 100 views. Someone else drops another video, does 100,000 views. Maybe they're paying for YouTube ads, right?
See, that's an important, I'm glad you said that. Don't mean to interrupt, but I'm glad you said that, because to me, that is also another thing, in that beyond it being a artificial way of inspiring someone, because it's not the true story, it can be pretty discouraging to a lot of people. Right. Who are like, I put the work in, I've done business the correct way, and now you have someone who's coming in here who's making it appear that, oh, you've been doing it the wrong way the entire time, because look at how fast But my thing is always, you don't know what they had to pay for that. You don't know what was part of that plan. One of my mentors, an artist named Murs, I went on tour with him, and I expressed this issue that I had with some of my peers who seemed to be like passing me up at a younger age. And he says he was drunk, but I'll never forget. It was in Texas at a tour stop. We was on tour with him. And he said, man, you don't know how many folks that person got in their pocket right now. He said, stop worrying about that and start to create the chapters in your book. And he's like, you have no idea the things that they're struggling with right now, the anxieties that come along with having the responsibility of being the first to do this or having a rise that was this fast. He said all these things. And I'm just like, I broke down in the tour trucks. Nobody had broke it down for me that way to where it was like, man, I've spent so much of my career doing like this. No wonder I can't focus in on a project long enough to give it my best or whatever I think is my best. It's too much of this. And I feel like what's happening is that through social media, through content in general, just the abundance of advertisements that are being thrown in front of us, I think that people are used to, instead of doing this, doing this. And that it's such a distraction from what your own greatness could be. And that's the message I really try to push is you have a story that needs to be heard, but you got to be the one that believes in it before anybody else, or it's never going to come to fruition.